view in the early morning, like about, I think it's 5 in the morning in Glasgow before I go to Fort William. It looks like a beautiful potential day, but I can almost assure you that it will be cats and dogs later on. Some local park art at the bus station. Just down the street from the last one, almost look identical. Towers like that are being torn down, not built, as soon as they can relocate the people. In the countryside, we couldn't see yesterday because of the rain.
That's a rough one, big Charles. That is rough terrain. It's broken ankles now.
This is a 15-ton snowplow. Used in, I think, 1936. This is a dining car built in 1953. Contains all of the interior woodwork. Tungsten lighting is in use. This was a British Railway Standards Mark I. Go inside and take a look at it. Some of the old looking suitcases that people might have used. Now it's just used as a restaurant when people get off the train, briefly. Apparently another version of that kind of thing. This we crossed, but you couldn't see it unless you were on the inside of the curve, maybe on the way back. The sleeping car from the 1930s to the 1970s. Camping coaches. Holiday accommodation for rail-borne tourists. I wonder if this is synonymous with what I was using in China, where they were cars just with sleeping berths.
Right off me. 50 pence.
Look closely, you can see how hummocky the ground is, and you'll see the water that's in there. That and the lack of vegetation anywhere else eliminated it for almost any kind of agricultural or farming or herding use. Only a few pockets of agricultural arable land. This did to sustain the plants that lived up here that were so nettlesome to the British. This is first class, where you get complimentary everything, I guess. I don't think you have to pay for your champagne, but you get really plushy seats. And for someone like me, you get a seat all by your lonesome. This is nice. And here's what it looks like from the outside looking in. The sound we hear is just the cooking of the engine as it cools down a bit. Our train has arrived at Mallaig, our final destination until the return back to Fort William. So I thought I'd try and pick up a little bit of local color in this quasi-port and tourist town. Pretty little town if it weren't in Scotland, where it's so cold and wet and rainy all the time. Well, it's fun to look at fishing boats. Always seems like such an interesting existence, its history, even if I don't want to endure it. powerful looking seaworthy boat, doesn't it? Looks like it's designed to take absolutely the worst and keep right on fighting through it. Or if you can tip it over, and even if you do, it does roll right straight back up. It's a creative kind of a pin latch, if you will. Notice that the hole is slotted so that when you take the lower part of this pin and flatten it out and it becomes wider than the pin itself, then it goes through those slots, turning it sideways, it locks it in place. It's a pretty little area. Houses are simply nondescript. You wonder when the weather's ever nice enough to enjoy those backyards, or do they? Only the law in Scotland is you can walk anywhere on any land as long as you're respectful and do no damage. This may be an example. It's a real difficult hump up that disused road to my right to get here, but presumably that person did or does. Panorama view. Here's my first interesting part of my Great Glen Way bike ride. Just having left the cycle shop moments ago, I crossed the river here, then we'll go up there to the left somewhere and pick up the trail going to the northeast. Since the east is directly to my right, we should angle down here and then be working my way back up that way. So I think I've arrived at the canal. Looks like one, doesn't it? And we go right, northeast. This is a series, I think, 7 or 8 lochs. It's called the, I think, the Seven Sisters. We have a boat going through now. Should be filling up that side, so it gets up to this level and proceeds on up. There's that boat down there, probably in the 2nd or 3rd bay from the bottom. It'll transit up through here. This one appears to be filling up right now. I don't know why, and that works that way. It'll eventually get to this level, but and those boats, I assume, are maybe queued up to go through. This is the best day I've seen so far in Scotland. This gives an idea of the pretty views alongside this canal. We should get to the loch up here somewhere. And this is what the forest oftentimes looks like that we went by on the train so fast. Peaceful, but boggy. Not a lot of undergrowth because nothing can grow but what you're looking at, some grass and moss. These are the Loy sluices, which I assume are just what we would call irrigation gates, and I don't know if those devices that are domed on top are actually covers to protect the winches or the wheels that you use to raise and lower the gates or not. I mean, if it were really clever in the future, they might be micro power generators. But probably there's some water rights down here that are being protected by those Loy sluices. Looking back, this canal is part of a loch system, or waterway system. Loch there meaning L-O-C-H, which is Scottish for lake. And back in 1838 or so, a fellow named Telford realized that if he could connect the lochs, including Loch Ness, with these series of canals, then he could create a shortcut across Scotland from the southwest to the northeast, cutting off the need for sailing ships to sail laboriously and dangerously around the northwest coast and lump, if you will, or grand protrusion of Scotland. He did that, but by the time or shortly after he had finished, the sailing industry boat was replaced by the steamship, and therefore it was no big deal to power around that, and therefore his business died. They tried to resurrect it by widening it at one time, but that didn't work either for very long. Interesting boat, whatever kind it is. Doesn't look like a fishing boat. Don't know what it is. Oh yes, it is a fishing boat. On its way out to sea. This is a swing bridge. We'll take a little bit closer look at it. But the portion on the right is the part that swings. And we'll move up to it. Yeah. I think actually both sides of the bridge swing out to provide access in this more and more remote area. Here we're standing on the bridge, and you can see how it works. It rotates on a pivot down in there somewhere. Might come out right there. It's a cute little bridge. Probably just about that old. 1838. And apparently it's mechanically operated. Yep, there's the gizmo there. Huh. Guessing if it is mechanically operated, then when he's done with this side, he scoots over in his boat, races up the hill. Probably doesn't have to race, and then does that side, and then reverses the process when the boat goes through. It's the last manually operated bridge, and he does do that. He does one side. Depends on whether the boat's large enough to justify two sides. And he said a local farmer already normally goes in for tea, so he'd have to close it, but the farmer's elsewhere today, so he doesn't have to close it. And he gets a word by radio when a boat's coming, so he's got plenty of time to decide one or two positions. What she looked like in her day still does, except for the ships. Notice those are sailing ships. Not that large or impressive. To the east, slightly southeast, is the top of the Nevis mountain range. Okay, looking at the map, this is where we started. Coming up along that yellow line, actually the dotted orange line, or double dotted orange line. There's the Loy sluices that we saw. It's called an aqueduct there. Then the Moy swing bridge we were just at. And the next place we'll get to is Garlicky, where there are a couple more lochs, is what I think those diamond-shaped things are. And then we'll cross and be on the left side of Lochie. Now we're probably right where it says about 10. And I'll show you what the context is. This is looking ahead, and as you can see, we've got the canal on the left and the river, which is the River Lochie, on the right. And I'll pan back along it, since we haven't seen that yet. And here we are at those lochs, just not very far from where the last little video clip was, showing the river for the first time. And here's the second of, I think, 2 or 3 lochs here. Like a sailboat coming through. It was a boat, but a little bit too late to catch this run of the lochs. I'm guessing that they probably have schedules for these lochs, but maybe not. As you can see that this one is emptying out as those folks on their sailboat sink deeper and deeper. Like across, and we'll be going along the left side of Loch Lochy, which is presumably right up there. So from the little walkway over the loch, went back to where the swing gate was, and then you go through that, take a right, and go up the hill on the road, and the signs posts for the Great Glen Way will point you in the right direction. And down here there's another one you can see blue that points us up onto this track through the forest. You might call here a forest track or path, and we would call it a trail. I just pushed the bike up this hill. Anything that's going to be steep, I'm going to push up, not ride up, for several reasons. Primarily, I want to shepherd my right knee and both knees until I'm positive what they can do. I need to give them time to get back in condition, particularly before the third day, which is a long run. Now we're entering this conifer forest, and I think we go through this until we get to a point where there are some birch trees and we can see down to the loch with great views that you see through the trees there. This forest trail is so pretty, particularly when I don't have to walk the bike up or down. It's a nice rolling trip. And here a beautiful view across the Loch Lochy. This is what happens when the trees fall over. Notice this has very little soil base for those roots to go into. Looks like a cushion, doesn't it? Probably is. And the woods are silent, dark, and deep. But I have many more promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep. Not to mention pushing the bike up this little hill. Looking back down the loch, I'm guessing that over there is a fish farm. Down there we go. Light of the mornings, people still start fires in this area. This is my setup. 2 bags that they gave me, a rack. The bike bags are great, work very well. That's it. This is the Arag River, however you pronounce it. Starts with an A, in case you want to follow up. Here the river flows lazily out into the loch, and some big homes right in this little bay here. Some of the young folks, young guys, just powered up the hill I walked up, or pushed up. Looking back down the loch, we're now at the end, or soon will be. You see how they're denuding their mountainsides. We are now at Laggan Lochs, and this is the Eagle, the inn on the water, a boat transformed into a bar and restaurant. Where we are right now is here at Laggan Lochs. We've got this next route up through here, all along the right side of Loch Lochy, whatever it is. Then we cross underneath this main drag, which I think is M28 or something like that. No, A82. That was close. And then we get to these lochs, Well, we have to cross over here somehow. And then somewhere up in here we go in between the canal and this river, all the way up to Fort Augustus, and then we're home for the night. This is the old road I'm on right now, but the new one's being built down here because it's going to be primo. You can see there it is. It's all going to be pretty flat gravel rolled. Maybe using crushed gravel, small crushed gravel on it. And for now we have this one, which is very pretty. You can see the barricades have fallen off to the side. Pretty little falls. We stopped to eat some cheese. It's funny, this afternoon after my break, I'm about 2/3 on this route done. I stopped for some soda, a couple cupcakes the lady made, and it's my shoulders and my neck that are killing me, not my legs. Here we're looking back down Lochs, I think it's called, or something like that. And here you see what the new path will be like. It's a crushed gravel base, and then there's very fine gravel on top of it, all rolled down. To die for. Here's the last lock before I think we get to St Agustus. She's now filling it by opening up the gate a bit. We'll use this sailboat and let him out. Long stretch of canal. Nothing particularly exciting about it, but we're running on a narrow ribbon of land that goes between the river on our left and the canal on our right. Now at St Augustine's, or Augustus rather, my destination for today. Thank God. So somewhere down in here I should find Mallaig's Lodge. Another very uniquely beautiful start to a day. A very stiff, steep push of the bike up a hill. Very steep. So here's the history. '08 investigator in his old scuba gear. This is the installation that used to be on Cherry Island, which was an island that was man-made about 2,500 years ago. It's called Cherry Island, named by 18th century soldiers at the Fort Augustus, perhaps because of wild cherry trees used to grow on it. And apparently that's Cherry Island. It doesn't look like an island, does it? And then Google it, the island is shown as a discrete little island in the water, out in the water, so maybe this is the wrong spot. I wondered how the trail people would handle this. At this point, the road splits, or the path splits into the high route and the low route. I'll take the low route. The high route, as you might imagine, much harder, ups and downs, steeps, ups and downs. And the low route, not so. And I want not so. So we is here, and we'll be going to the right. Excellent way to deal with this issue. Logging is big here, but I hope they don't destroy the woods with clear cutting like they have in other spots here. You can see there's been a long history of lumber here. I hope they wisely preserve it, not like the American forests of the Northwest. Well, I guess this answers my earlier question. I don't know if those slopes were logged and then cleaned up, but they look like they're terribly rife for erosion. This landscape's been pretty mangled, but it has spectacular views. Looking back, here's a sign you won't often see in the United States. Although I do take water occasionally out of the little streams that flow into the lakes when I'm kayaking sometimes, but that's really iffy and I'm not sure I do it anymore. See, we've just come down from St Agustus, which means going up the map, and where we've been right now is worked our way in that U that opens from the left to the right, to the left of Inverness, and we're now down at Telford's bridge apparently. I'm guessing that this dramatic location is Telford's bridge, or Tedford. Telford was his name, but he was an engineer who designed this whole Great Glen Way. But fortunately, even though that project ultimately failed, he was able, because of many of his other fine engineering jobs, to sustain himself. This is the stream that flows under the bridge for modern traffic. A very dramatic spot, and it flows out into Loch, L-O-C-H. I wonder what that little building there is. Probably just a sightseeing kiosk. It was and is a beautiful little bridge in a magnificent setting. This bridge was one of nearly 1,000 built by Telford between 1881 and 1819 as part of a general plan to improve the Highland communications. There's the bridge we were standing on. I wonder what that little piece of work was for there. This is the bridge when you're on top of it. Having dropped out of the mountains at Inverness, we now get to climb right straight back up. By that I mean push right straight back up. We came through the trees on that side of that gorge near Inverness and traversed along the right somewhere, and then down and across the river, and then pushed the bike up to here. And here is a sign post. It tells us we're going the right way. How they're denuding this whole area. How ugly it's someday going to look. And look what they've done way back on those mountains, if in fact that is the case. It may not be. Up on top, we came to the intersection of the upper trail where it comes back into the lower trail, and so now it's the main trail, and now the main trail is taking a relatively steep dive on what is almost a simple little track. You can see it doesn't look like it gets all that much use, but it's away from the traffic. You hear the birds chirping It's a pretty place to be. It's a pretty ride. This road, or track if you want, trail, we picked up off that steep narrow one a while up there, and it gives us a beautiful straight run. It's all flat with a little bit of grass on it. It's a beautiful trail. In fact, it was so good, I was running so fast I had to slow down and stop because my neck started to hurt. Back. Looking back down where we've come today, way down there somewhere. Okay, this is the north end of the second upper and lower routes, but I never saw the sign for the upper route. Boy, if this got some steep ups and downs, I can't imagine what they are. I think, God, I just walked up very, very steep hills. I was worried coming up this high that I'd miss the trail, but there's my trail signs there, so that's good. What's interesting from this perspective is that we have views not only across the loch, but across those hills that side the loch. And we can look back into those valleys, and we'll do it with a telephoto in a moment. Quite a rugged country, this western Scotland. We're in a curious section of this forest lands here. There's probably a set of 4 of these gates real close to each other, and some fencing that's, as you can see, this one's about 6 feet high. But if you look back through there, you'll see it's even higher, more like 7 or 8 feet high. And then here it drops down to about 4 foot high. And there's a road there. And that road runs between those 2 fences, so they're designed to just bracket the road. But here's some very pretty land, and this is a pretty trail. It's a very nice trail through here. No mud and slop, just very nice. Be a little careful because it's gravelly. But why this tall fence? What's being kept in or out of these properties? Pretty enough here that I'm just going to walk my bike through here just for the pleasure of it. Ranching operation up on top where we've come. Unlike England, or at least Wales when I was there, this looks pretty messy and unkempt. Whereas everything in Wales was neat as a pin. It's just one example. I don't know what everything else is like. And the stories this old farm building could tell. And notice how it's designed so they've alternated big blocks with a square, if you will, of 2 or 3 or 4 flat ones. Looking off to our left as we continue towards Drummond ... Here we're coming down off of a long, steep run, combination of roads, paved road and dirt road, and a pathway, and then a cow path, which I'm on right now, into the town of Drummond, something or other. And that's where I'll stay tonight, at Loch Ness Backpacker. This is the portion of my monstrous dinner last night, made with Indian sauce from India. It has potatoes and some chicken slices and some tomatoes and onions that I got from the grocery store. Easy to make. This is one of the main rooms in the hostel. Common room would be best to describe it. It's an old house with some new additions, and that building that was converted into units. It looks like it was a converted building. Nice old funky place, but in great condition. Drum is over there. We've just done that loop, if you will, or bite. And now we're moving northwest again. Finally got off that road. Fortunately, there's a asphalted walkway or bike path combo that we could use, which is great because that's dangerous the way they fly down that road. And down off those hills I came yesterday somewhere. And here Loch Ness, so keep an eye out. To the right in that inlet is Drum. There's a castle on the corner. I didn't go down and look at that. My goal is to do this complete ride, and anything else is extraneous, particularly when yesterday was a grueling day, as I know today. The irony is we're about right over here somewhere on this headland. This is what it looked like. I'm just guessing, but perhaps this tower here is that part that's most visible. Wonder what this was in the center, a dovecote maybe? The drawbridge down the bottom. It's hard to see much of it with the reflection behind me, sorry about that. All around this spot is where those 2,000 Newfies did their great work. And maybe some of those old stumps or the humps you see, which are moss-covered stumps, are the ones that they cut down. Here's an example of how they use those trees that we see occasionally in the clear-cut areas that are about 8 to 10 feet tall. Not as tall as this one, but to tie off cables to for winches and for hauling stuff like this log up this way here or something like that. Just a pan further up Loch Ness as I make my way, I think, higher into this mountain. Forever up. Two young fellows, probably in their 30s, stopped on their mountain bikes to chat. Indicated they're going from Inverness, the end of my trip, to Fort William, the beginning, today. They don't have any packs, but still, it's a wicked ride. Gives me an idea of the gulf between youth and me. my goal in 3 days is to do the same. They said, are you going far? And I said, I hope so. They said, are you going to Inverness? And I said, I hope so. And they told me that I'm just about at the top. And I said, yeah, I've heard those lies before. But anyway, it was all with goodwill, and it was very gentlemanly of them to stop and chat. A few moments ago when we chatted, the fellows told me I was almost to the top, so I'm guessing the top is somewhere up in there. But top's a dubious term because you can get to the top, then go screaming downhill, and then guess what? Trail goes back up the top. It's me 12 miles to do. It's an interesting windmill, small one, probably feeding just that house, probably feeds into the grid any excess. But out in this remote area, even though the power line runs right by, they may have so much wind up here that really makes itself pay off. Normally I'd have the power to bike up this relatively easily, but right now it's a chore and I have to decide, do I walk it and push it, or do I try to ride? Decided to stop here and have a rest and eat an apple and some M&Ms and drink some water. There's some rocks that have fallen from this old wall that I'm sitting on. The trail is absolutely excellent throughout this whole experience. Sometimes it's a very narrow trail through very close bushes, which is interesting. Other times it's this normal old 2-track, but down to 1-track now through the trees, quiet as can be, because this is the only thing it's used for now. There were some difficult, steep, rocky trails coming up this morning from Drummond, but that's about it. That's probably inexcusable. It's too steep to do anything else with it but leave it natural. A lady at the hostel last night was laying over there for a day because she'd come this route the opposite way and was just literally wrecked. But she looked to me to be probably 40 to 60 pounds overweight. No poles, near as I could gather, but maybe she had them. This morning, a gaggle of older folks, broken up into groups of 2 to 3 or more, talking, oblivious to anything else around them. I guess they don't get out of trips like this what I get, and that's moments just like this, sitting here. Another couple, including a young woman who was chubbier than chubby. I mean, this has got to be a tremendous tax on her body, I would think. Even if she succeeds, what's it do to her body to carry that excess weight? I'm in Inverness now. Yesterday I completed my mountain bike trip, coming off hills that you can barely make out there, looping around here, across what is an island down there a ways, and coming across on that last bridge on this main river here. And Inverness is that area over there. There's the main bridge right there. And the castle, which you can't see, is up there. We'll look at it a little bit later. A statue of hope and charity, and I think it's faith. And then my hostel is probably that building with the chimney sticking up above the face of the building in front of us. And I'm guessing this is the Ness River without pulling out my map, I'm too lazy, flowing out of Ness Loch. So as I make my way upriver to the bridge to go down and get my train ticket, there's the castle. And a pretty English-like, but the Scots would prefer that I said Scot-like. It's a pretty area. Bike path that's been running for miles along the track from the town of Evermore as we approach Glasgow, or in the direction of Glasgow. This is out in a very rural area. stonework or brickwork along here, this wall. It was actually an abandoned platform.
The next stop is
On my way back to Glasgow from Inverness, and we're approaching Stirling. That may be a monument to Paulus.